Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Ravage, Dungeons of Plunder, and is from the publisher Beardy Brothers. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Those links will take you to the official Kickstarter project page. You don't have to take my word for anything here. You can go there, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, Ravage Dungeons of Plunder is it's either a cooperative game, a competitive game, or a solo game, depending on how you want to play the game or how you and your group want to play the game. You take control of a group of orcs who, if you're in the cooperative game, are working together sort of as like a trial set by your elders to go down through a dungeon, fight some monsters, get some loot, and keep each other alive in order to become a more effective war band. You have a cultist, a shaman, a headhunter, and a berserker. You have your choice of which character you want to play, and you all have different skills, weapons, special abilities that will help get you through and those objectives, which are either going to be fighting bosses, just getting certain artifacts or something like that down in the dungeon. If you play the competitive game, you're going head to head against the other players trying to take them out, and in a solo game, you are just trying to survive on your own going down through the dungeon. We're going to focus mostly on the cooperative game just because that has most of the features of the game to show off, and I'm going to show you that with a prototype version of the game. So what you see here in this prototype is not necessarily going to be in the final version, or things might change around, but mostly it's going to look the same, but just keep that in mind as we go through this. Then we're going to come back and we'll discuss it further. Ravage Dungeons of Plunder is a game for 1 to 5 players. In a solo game, you simply need to get through the dungeon and destroy a random boss. In a co-op game, you work together to complete a quest, usually also involving killing a boss, but sometimes meeting other objectives or just surviving. And in the treachery mode, you actually compete against the other players, using traps and monsters against them, with the goal of being the first to kill 6 other heroes. For simplicity's sake, I'll primarily be going over the co-op mode. Start the setup by putting out the start card of the dungeon. Set aside the room cards from the Delve deck, then proceed to follow the quest setup. There are several different quests in Ravage, and each one has a different objective, and this shows in the Delve deck setup. You'll often have to place a specific room at a certain place, usually the bottom of the deck, underneath randomized general Delve cards. You'll also place out a deck of Explore cards, the rest of the Goblin cards, and boss cards if the scenario calls for it. Each player takes one of the hero boards, either the Berserker, the Cultist, the Headhunter, or the Shaman, and a set of weapon and skill cards unique to their hero. If you're playing with Treachery mode, you'd actually use the flip side of the board, which modifies your abilities a bit for a competitive game. You'll also have tokens to keep track of health, XP, teeth, and energy, which starts at 2. Lastly, you'll start with 1 card from the Greedy Goblin deck. These are either cards you can attach to your hero to modify your abilities permanently, or one-time use abilities you can use on yourself or other players. The players' pieces are placed on the starting room. Starting with the oldest player, take your turns in clockwise order, each turn following a specific sequence of phases. Phase 1 is a Delve Deeper. Draw a card from the Delve deck you previously set up. If you're within 2 cards of a playable edge, you can attach the new card to its edge or overlap them. Black spaces are impassable walls. Pay attention to the arrows, which show where the heroes can explore. If you draw a special room card, you must place out every card indicated together. There are also special features of the terrain, like healing fountains and energy shrines, each of which has 2 appropriate tokens players can take in action to grab. There are also resurrection circles where you can respawn if you die. Phase 2 is Something in the Dark. You will draw a card from the Explore deck. If you're lucky, it will be some loot. Otherwise, it will be a monster or a trap. If it's a monster, the card is placed with any others in play on the monster track, and the monster piece is placed on the Delve card that was just played. Monsters have attack ratings, either ranged or melee, and a defense rating. These tell you how many dice they get to roll in which color. They also have special abilities, a health rating, a critical hit indicator, and the number of teeth you get for slaying them. Trap cards will require you to roll the trap die and hopefully not get a trap symbol, which can indicate the trap hurting you or making an already bad situation worse. Phase 3 is the main phase of the turn, Ravage. Your hero can perform 2 actions in any order, and you can do the same action twice if possible. The first type of action is movement. Every character can move 4 spaces unless it says otherwise. Moving through monsters can provoke attacks. Next, you can surge by losing 1 health to gain 2 energy. You can also search for Plunder, though only once per turn. Roll the trap die and, if successful, draw a Plunder token, which could be helpful items, sneaky goblin cards, or a trap that deals damage to you. Lastly, you may attack a monster. A melee attack must be adjacent to the enemy, whereas ranged weapons have a limited target range as indicated, and you must have line of sight. You can always attack with your basic melee attack, but if you use one of your special attack cards, you add the total dice together and then roll. Some cards require you to spend energy, which will also move up your XP tracker when you do so. You want to get as many symbols as possible that match your attack style. You can also gain energy for every energy face that you roll. The defending monster will roll its defense value in dice. If the attacker surpasses the defender's result, they take the difference in damage. If defeated, you take their reward, usually teeth, along with their card as a trophy. Next is Phase 4, the Watch Out phase. Every monster that can attack the heroes will do so, or will move first and then do so. Combat follows the same rules, except now you are the defender. It's possible you'll run into a boss depending on the quest. These are incredibly powerful, and they have their own special cards they'll use for attacks. Once a boss appears, you will not delve any further into the dungeon and won't draw any more of those cards. Phase 5 is Gathering Strength. If your XP tracker is full, you can level up one of your skill or weapon cards by simply flipping it over. You also draw 3 cards from the Sneaky Goblin deck and choose which of the cards you will buy, with the rest going under the deck. The cost of the cards is at the bottom in teeth. That's it for the phases, but there's a few other things to go over. You may be affected by status effects like poison and fire during the course of the game. These will usually hit you either at the beginning or end of your turn. There's always a chance, of course, that you'll die from your injuries, whether from attacks, traps, or status effects. If you die, a loot token is either placed on the monster who kills you or the tile where the trap killed you. Any player can claim it in the form of 2 teeth and one of your attachment Sneaky Goblin cards, if you had one at all. You may resurrect in any resurrection space, but collectively your party only has resurrection tokens equal to the number of players, -1. If a player dies and there are no tokens left, everyone loses the game. Otherwise, keep going until you meet your quest objective. That is Ravage, Dungeons of Plunder. Well, Ravage, Dungeons of Plunder is an interesting game in the sense that it's trying to have a more streamlined version of the, much bulkier, more grandiose tabletop miniatures, dungeon crawling games. And by the way, more grandiose isn't necessarily a good thing. Those games are very difficult to set up, very time consuming, and they don't encourage you just doing a one-off mission. Now, in this game, you can go from through multiple dungeon runs, essentially. But you can also just say, hey, I want to bust out this game real quick and play it. And you can do that with Ravage, and it's not something you can easily do with other games because the setup for this is very easy, and learning the game is very easy as well, and that's to its credit. But at the same time, there's a lot going on in the game. You have your character with multiple different skills and powers and weapons, and that can be upgraded throughout the course of the game. And that's on top of the things that you can get from the deck, the Sneaky Goblin deck, with more attachments for your character or one-time use items. And figuring out when to use those most effectively is one of the key parts of the game. On top of that, there are a lot of different monsters in the game that you're going to face. So there's a lot of variety too, and that's not even counting the quests. There's all these different quests of different objectives you can meet. Of course, the most exciting which are the boss monsters, each of which is different and has their own unique set of powers that you have to worry about, and they are very difficult. Plus, the randomly generated dungeon, going down and putting out the delve cards and sort of crafting the dungeon as you go along and doing what's best for your group, sort of keeping yourselves on whatever path is going to work out best for you, though you are at the mercy of the deck to some degree, as well as when those either monsters, traps, or sometimes loot come out of the Explorer deck. So lots of variability in the game, lots of tactical thinking that you have to express in order to survive, and also strategic thinking of how you're going to use your powers most effectively. Every hero feels very different than the others. If you play the cultist, summoning your minions in order to fight for you, you're playing a very different game than what the Berserker is playing, but at the same time, it's not so complicated that you can't just grab a character and play it for the first time without knowing what's going on, and that's to the game's credit as well. So if any of these things appeal to you, if you like the fantasy setting, but at this time from the Orcs perspective, which we didn't even talk about, is a very unique thing. You're not just a human hero mowing down orcs. And if you just like the gameplay where you have a dungeon crawler, but it's not overwhelmingly complex and is going to keep you at the table for 6 hours, then definitely check out Ravage Dungeons of Plunder. It is on Kickstarter right now. You can find out more information by going to the page. You can follow the link in the top corner of your screen as well as down in the description section underneath this video, and hopefully you will consider backing the project. That is Ravage Dungeons of Plunder from Beardy Brothers. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting our sponsors. As always, take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.